Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Accessibility Talks, the monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker or speakers in this case to present a topic, and afterward, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. I'm today's host, Andrew Olson. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a lead front-end developer at Bounteous, and I enjoy front-end development and the challenge of making the web accessible for everyone on any device. I'm thrilled to be part of the A11yTalks team as the event coordinator, and I'm excited to host this panel discussion today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to remind folks that our group seeks to provide a safe, friendly environment. We require all participants to adhere to the Accessibility Talks Code of Conduct. This applies to all community interactions and events. This also applies to verbal questions as well as chat in the text channels. The Code of Conduct can be found on our website, ALLYtalks.com. That's A11yTalks.com. All participants should be able to engage in productive dialogue and should share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect. If you have a question for our panel today, you have two ways to do that. First, you can post it on Twitter with the hashtag ALLYtalks. Again, that's hashtag A11yTalks. Or if you're participating in the live chat right now, you can add your question to the YouTube chat window. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to today's panel. First, we have Jennifer Chadwick. Pronouns are she, her. She is a senior accessibility consultant international at SiteImprove. And a fun fact that Jen shared with us is that she has dual Canadian and UK citizenship. And she was the lead singer of an all-female band touring London and the south side of England in the 2000s. Jen, please say hello to everyone. And I'd love to know more about your band and maybe the name of your band.
Yeah, good times. Andrew, thanks so much for having me. The name, there are two band names. The Peril, which sounds pretty dangerous. We did a lot of some Joan Jett covers, and then Dollfire, which, yeah, taking a feminist stance on things. So more than happy to be here. And yeah, without further ado, I'll hand it over to everyone else. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, we have Tyler. Pronouns are he, him. He is a principal digital accessibility engineer at Optum Technology. And a fun fact that Bill shared with us is that he loves to travel and has been to 78.8% of the counties in the United States. For those of you that want to check the math, that's 2,476 out of 3,143. Bill, that is really fascinating. I'd love to know if you have plans to visit them all.
That's the hope. There are some that are really hard to get to. And so like Alaska, I have yet to visit the state at all, but it's one of those things that gives you a challenge. You get to see a lot of the country.
That is wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I'd like to introduce to you Sean Kelly. Pronouns are he, him. He is a senior digital accessibility engineer at Optum Technology. A fun fact about Sean is he's from Minnesota. So going off of Bill's visiting all the counties, I would love to know, since you're from Minnesota, do you have a chance to visit all 10,000 lakes, or is that not a thing?
So I actually think that 10,000 is probably a conservative estimate because you can't drive in a straight line around here without running into a lake at some point.
Especially with the weather we've been having as well.
Exactly.
The lake and my sump pump is going off. So if you hear some thudding in the background, that's a good thing for me. Keeps
there we go.
Above water.
Figuratively and not so figuratively.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much, Sean. Nice meeting you. So the topic today, the panel discussion, is introducing ARRM, assigning ownership to get things done. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Jen, Bill, and Sean. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, yes, thank you. This is, so we get the slides going here. I think we can begin. So, yes, this is introducing ARRM, assigning ownership to get things done. And this is accessibility A11yTalks. So let's begin. Again, we get to the next slide is kind of what we've already done. It's like you kind of covered who we are. So I think we can probably just like skip on to the next one. And Jen, you can tell them about who else is involved.
And let me
Whoops.
just unmute myself. That way I can get myself back. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know us, but we would like to introduce the other ARRM task force members within the W3C. So that's Juliana Rosell. Her pronouns are she and her. She's a senior program lead, an accessibility and inclusion strategist for many things amongst our Canadian government benefits from her knowledge quite a bit. Then we have Denis Boudreau. His pronouns are he and him. He's the principal accessibility consultant at DQ. Lewis Phillips, pronouns he and him. He's the senior accessibility consultant at DQ as well. And then we have Michael Mistak, pronouns he and him. He's the accessibility manager at Diamond. So we've grown quite a bit in the years that we've been together. So yeah, just an agenda. So getting started, we'll do an introduction to the accessibility roles and responsibilities mapping methodology, or ARRM. We'll give you a background on the history and the purpose and overall goals that we've come together for. And then what accessibility challenges are you facing? I'm sure these are very, very common, and would love to get your thoughts on that after or continue the chat. And then the whole purpose of the ARRM is really to assign ownership to roles on the team to empower everyone. So we'll figure out how, and then we'll do a walkthrough, a couple of very specific examples of the ARRM methodology applied to some success criteria. And then steps to conduct your own ARRM exercise. Where do we go from here, and how can you leverage it in your own teams? And then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A. Really hope so. So on to you, Bill.
So let's get started by just kind of a background of what ARRM is. So how has the accessibility roles and responsibilities mapping methodology been described? And we kind of heard that earlier. It's like like our title of the presentation: assigning ownership to get things done. It helps because it gives a definition of a clear set of responsibilities that a team needs to get things done. And one of them is also, we've done this presentation in the past, it's a framework to fight accessibility apathy. Now, the apathy isn't so much that you are not concerned about accessibility, it's just that you're not aware of the roles that are involved, are not aware of how they impact accessibility. So it's getting more involvement and more awareness of things. And as has also been mentioned, it's a gift to digital teams. This is something that a process that can help people get their teams to be more effective by getting accessibility distributed across the roles that matter and the ones that make the difference, so that things are done more efficiently. And ultimately, it all gets that great goal of getting shift left of accessibility. So if we continue to the next slide, we get the purposes and goals, and that is that, as mentioned before, this is a W3C resource through the EO working group, or Education and Outreach Working Group, the W3C. We put our first public draft out in March of 2020. In fact, it was CSUN when the three of us were last together, and that's when we were doing the introduction of this to the world. And since then, through last year and into this year, we're gathering community feedback. And so that's kind of the background of what it is as a tool. And more descriptive is that it's an adaptive framework to guide stakeholders to integrate web accessibility in all relevant aspects of the product or project lifecycle. And it's an exercise to help team members take ownership of the design, development, and content decisions, because people are making these decisions, but they're not aware of that impacts accessibility. A choice of color, a choice of words, a choice of the features, how they work and interactions can be huge. So we kind of see two outcomes: that you get a better team collaboration, better education, ownership, and clarity across the team. And that when you have that, you get a second outcome, which is you get a shared plan and documentation. Ideally, that's going to get your roles to document things for how they're going to do their work and how they're going to communicate this information so it's accessible from start to finish. Now, when it comes to some of the challenge, Sean can cover some of those questions.
I suppose it helps to unmute myself. It's easier to hear that.
Go back and do that.
Yeah. So some of the challenges you're likely facing, these are things we've probably all heard in one form or another. My team still doesn't have a clear enough understanding of the subject matter. My team doesn't even know where to begin with accessibility requirements and best practices. My team only considers accessibility towards the end of our process or life cycle. My team often deprioritizes accessibility due to poor planning and tight deadlines. My team has no common understanding of what accessibility even means. My team perceives accessibility to be too time-consuming, too expensive, and overly complex. Accessibility doesn't get enough executive buy-in and leadership support to be taken seriously. Someone is yet to be made accountable for accessibility ownership in our life cycle. And what are some of the, as we go through this, think of some of the biggest challenges that you face related to digital accessibility. Mm-hmm. So what we've got here is a graphic representation of a racetrack or kind of a highway with some off-ramps, and we'll get into fleshing that metaphor out as we go along here. So ARRM is a framework for accessibility. And when we look at these challenges, it's easy to understand why teams struggle to implement accessibility in their own design and development life cycles. And let's see, is there one more?
Yeah, it's over to me to talk about, so that graphic representation of the cycle that you regularly go through on projects. Within the ARRM task force, we've kind of identified some of it's just a core. We'll get to other roles in a moment, but the core roles within who will be conducting or sort of benefit from the ARRM team exercise is going to be, we've identified them as the user experience designer and interaction designer, visual designer, content author, content contributors, content owners, and then front-end development or implementing the designs. So those are the roles within the ARRM as it is a framework. However, and I've got a little representation of Lego men who have their suits, their racetrack drivers, and they've got their tools at the ready. And then when I move to the next slide, it's also the Lego guys with some other tools. One is, he's holding the walkie-talkie to manage things. So it's kind of a representative of, the other folks that are sort of, bringing information in to that core team and the requirements, the business requirements. And then on the other side, perhaps QA testers and other sort of roles that sort of test the output or outcome of the exercise itself. So what about me? Where do roles like business analysts, QA testers, and other various admin roles really fit into the ARRM picture? So another one we've added recently is user researchers. If we have the framework that has those core practitioners, user research is also a really important piece of gaining understanding about what needs to be done, right? So, and let us know what other roles, are there any roles missing, what other roles you might consider in this discussion. But Bill, back to you about the role-based decision tree, which is another key component of the framework.
Correct. Yes. So we've described Jen covered some of the primary roles, and what we face in this is trying to say, when you assign ownership to these roles, how do you do that? And that's where we came with this role-based decision tree. Kind of think of it as a flow chart or a process that helps you to ask the question, who owns accessibility, and get that answered. So it starts with which role should own the accessibility considerations in your life cycle. And it comes with a series of questions, which begin with, should it be driven by someone who is focused on business or non-functional considerations? That's like the first question. Second question might be content authoring considerations. And after that, it would be visual design considerations. And after that, UX design considerations, and then front-end development. And we're going to be talking primarily about the web, though it could extend to other things like mobile and applications. Then it could be after front-end QA, and maybe if it's someone else in your life cycle, then who? I mean, when we talk about these roles, and we're going to get into some better details, they're the core ones that Jen mentioned earlier that are the key decision makers, and we want to make sure we identify what those are, because the titles can change. You may have different people with shared roles. If you've got a big team, it might be more finely grained and separated. If it is a small team, you might have a lot of people, you have just a couple of people wearing a lot of the roles. So that is the kinds of questions that we ask. There's also another consideration, which is the levels of ownership. So when it comes to assigning ownership roles, we have something that's similar to a RACI model, which is RACI, which is for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Those are levels of accountability. In this model, we have three. We have a primary, secondary, and a contributor. The primary is the ultimate owner, is accountable for the entire accessibility task and drives that decision-making process. At the end of the day, this is the person who's got the final sign-off, the person who, if something goes wrong, they're the first point of contact. They are the serious owner. And you will have one and only one of those in our model, because there has to be somebody accountable, because otherwise, how will anything get fixed? Now, that person may do all of that deciding on themselves by their own or on their own, but as general, there will be other people that are involved. The secondary owners are ones that collaborate directly with the primary owner to complete the accessibility task. They can provide information, they can influence decisions, making the case for what should be done and give some background of why that should be that way. And they can be actively involved in making that decision directly. But when it's all said and done, it's the primary owner who gets the final say, because they have the most skin in the game. So we've got the active participants, primary and secondary, and the last are contributors. And these tend to be consulted, but are not actively involved in completing the accessibility task. They can provide information, requirements, initial guidelines to the primary and secondary owners, and often that's their job. They're done. Great examples tend to be a business owner who will have, say, initial requirements and hand those off, or they may have a brand guidelines and have the brand book so that the presentation requirements are all defined. They do that, and then they leave it to the experts to take it to market and get it all finished off. So those are the ownership roles of that. And what we see here on this slide, and I'll cover it just briefly because we'll get into some of the exits signs that you see here as we do an exercise in a moment. But this is fleshing out what Sean was talking about earlier. This is that racetrack, and we have our exits, and there are 6 of them, and they all have a sign at the top which says business, content authoring. And third is visual design. Exit 4 is UX design, followed by front-end design, and last, exit 6 is testing. And each of these is just like an exit sign on the side of a US freeway, which has got the signs of, little sub-signs that say, who's at this exit. And we're using these to identify, from what the role would be responsible for and what sorts of things that they'd make decisions on that help us to decide whether or not they own that criterion or that checkpoint. So from there, let's try driving it. Sean, you were talking about this before. Why don't you take us out and take us to our first trip down the road? Okay, Sean?
Sure. So consider this so taking a few examples here, consider this checkpoint for success criteria 1.1.1. Informative alternate text is provided for images that is not spacer or the default image file name. Who should own this requirement? Is this a business or non-functional requirement? Probably not. Is this a content authoring consideration? Ding, ding, ding. So that's who we've identified as a primary owner of this checkpoint.
Okay. And then let's move on to the second checkpoint or task that would be tested through the ARRM exercise. So the exercise is for checkpoint one that's related to success criterion 1.4.3 about contrast. Regular sized text is sufficiently contrasted against its background with a ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. Sorry, Sean, I think you were going to cover this one. Did you want to continue?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or I can just take one of the next ones. You can finish this one just to make it easier flow.
All right, thanks. So so who should own this requirement? So is it just a functional, sort of non-functional, or just a high-level business requirement? Not exactly. There's a specific sort of need to fix the contrast ratio and color in the CSS, I'd say. So we'll go past exit 1. Is this a content authoring consideration? Well, I wouldn't say so, given the text itself. What's described there in the text is fine. It's not about that. It's more about the contrast itself and the visual presentation. So we'll say no. And then we go through the decision tree. Is this a visual design consideration? And on the sign, the exit sign, we have sort of identified, as Bill mentioned, the subcategories, things that we feel or we've harmonized that designers are kind of responsible for. And one of them is color, font, layout, and part of that styling guide. So we thought, yeah, I think this is a visual design consideration. So perhaps that visual designer would be the primary owner of this checkpoint or fix. Yeah. So Sean, do you want to take us through the example 3?
Sure. So consider this checkpoint for success criteria 1.1.1. A mechanism that conveys the full explanation of complex images is defined. Who should own this requirement? Is this business or non-functional? Not so much. Is this a content authoring consideration? Again, less so. Is this a visual design consideration? And yes. Oh, as long as one of us is paying attention, it might not be me.
No, I think there's a complex image in there, like a bar chart or something that's got a lot of data there. But no, I get.
I got turned around as far as which order the.
But no, maybe there'd be a secondary.
It's talking about a mechanism, so that's not. There's a complex image, but that keyword is mechanism.
Exactly.
All right, we're gonna keep driving. All right.
There we go. And last but not least, we got is this a UX design consideration? Mm-hmm. It is.
Okay, I'll take the wheel, and let's try one more example.
Sure. Before we move on, this is one that I wanted to talk about because the mechanism that conveys the full explanation of a bar chart presented visually is defined. I think the reason we decided, or sort of our example is for UX design is, would you both agree it's related to the page layout, right? Just ensuring that text or another sort of description or mechanism to understand that visual or as an alternative is in the page layout. So I'd call on the UX designer for that one. That's my personal feel, being a UX designer.
How do you come up with a non-visual metaphor to organize that information?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Bill, back to you. Yeah, for example.
Okay, so we have our 4th example is yet another checkpoint that's based on 111 non-text content, and it reads, adjacent link images and text links pointing to the same URL are combined into single links. Who should own this requirement? And I will read out some of these signs because we have kind of skipped by there, but let me just, because some of the roles can be important, let me read some of the things that are. So is this a business or non-functional requirement? When we say that, that's like, is it a functional business requirement? Is it a logo or branding thing? Is it a non-functional? Is it core features or high-level functionality? No, this is really specific. I mean, this is what's on the screen. It's a link and an icon. So no, this is below business. It's nothing. So we say no. We get to the next exit, and that's content authoring. And that's got things like copy decks and related documents, image alt text, taxonomy, labels, and copy, semantics, document structure, text transcripts and captions, and a descriptive audio. One of the things we should say about our content authoring is that we include almost all of your time-based media. So if you've got podcasts that are video or audio only, if you've got videos, they fit into this, they would be on this exit as well. We look at that checkpoint, it says adjacent link images and text are pointing the same URL to the same link. Well, the content author may have provided that text, and it's probably a decorative image. Maybe there's alt text there, but that's talking about there's a single link, and they may have provided the text, but they didn't have anything to do with it. So no, it's not the content author. Exit 3 is visual design, and as Jen mentioned earlier, this is color, font, layout, and spacing is one of the items. It's adding brand guidelines and validation and variations to what is specific to the site compared to other things the company may have. It's the style guide. If you've got a site project big enough, it may have a full guide telling you what the presentation should look like. If it's not in the style guide, it might be high fidelity comps and mock-ups. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. It's visual assets. Well, they could have done the icons. So yeah, they're adjacent. The visual designer might have put them together with layout, but this is still trying to say it's a single link. So no, we say no, we go on from here. Next, we drive down, we get to exit 4, and that's UX design. And the things at this exit is like wireframe storyboards and workflows, UI component interactions and features, general page regions and features. A great one we've added here is that we got user testing with people with disabilities, and the icon on there's got that aggressive wheelchair figure who's trying to race ahead because they're not just passive, they're trying to be active. We would love to have them actively doing testing and giving their input on it. And keyboard gestures and behaviors. So back to the question, it's like, is this adjacent? Is that the owner of adjacent link images and text links pointing to the same URL? Well, that's much closer. I mean, it's a functional thing. They might put that as a requirement, but this is probably a checkpoint when you're doing the actual testing. If it failed, it would have been a requirement, and that's not really, that should have been in there or not, but I don't think so. We say no to this one, and we go to our next exit, which we haven't reached before, and that is exit 5 for front-end development. Here we've got items like HTML structure, why ARIA, which has got the great question, to use or not to use. That is that's a serious question here. CSS, content layout in CSS is right here. We got scripting behaviors and functionality, which is just another way of saying you've got JavaScript in this under the hood. And your choice of frameworks. Maybe you're using something off the shelf like Material or React or other older libraries, or maybe you buy ones such as Kendo. So if you look at this and say, okay, this is the implementation, and the HTML structure say, well, that's what we're talking about. You want to have one anchor tag that has the icon and the text, and it's one link, not two, and it's easy to target. So yes, this is the check. This is the exit we're on, and that's the owner who gets that. And so that's our last example of these. We can take a step back and take a look at it. We've talked about the first 5 exits. There's last one here that we didn't reach. It says exit 6 for testing, and that's really for linting and a lot of bench testing and other things that a developer might do that it's like are going to be not so much a decision making, but a testing situation, and that we do capture. Now, this is this graphic, as I said, it has the 6 exits. If you go past exit 6, we want you to go around and back to the start because somebody made the decision that impacted that checkpoint, or if you're assigned to criteria, this success criteria. We want you get to start again and go back and figure out who owns that. Maybe the challenge is that these definitions and the sorts of things we've marked for these exits don't really align, or they aren't as familiar to you as we think they should be, and that's where we'd love your input. But ultimately, we should have the decision maker and the owner of the criteria or checkpoints defined by getting through one of these exits. So that's the part of the exit. Now, this is a poster we want to be able to share, and someday we'll get it out so you can download this, you can have it as a resource. But until then, we've got some other things that help you do this. We've got some great things that are on our site, and Sean can tell you more about some of the work we've got that you can get to now.
So we've got some ready-made templates, and the thought here is, does that sound like an awful lot of work? Don't worry, we've got you covered. So getting started with these ready-made role-based templates, we've got 4 of them to start out with, one for UX design, another for visual design, one for content authoring, and one for development. And we've got some links here to those 4 different resources on the W3C site.
So could I just say, I think, so just as you mentioned, we've broken sort of a master checkpoint or task list down into those subsections. So if you're, a UX designer, you could go directly to the list of those. Would you say they're somewhat based on some are based on WCAG success criteria, other based on best practices, but these are the things, the tasks that we feel should be owned by those individuals. Yeah, and that's just a place to get started. So if you wanted to sort of understand, I'm a UX designer, this is my first time with accessibility, I'm not quite sure, what I'm responsible for. Would you both agree it's a good place to go just to land and sort of see what sort of preset templated assignments or task points we've assigned we've assigned underneath under that role specifically, that skill set.
Yeah, the situation here is that we've got a lot of examples, and if you feel uncomfortable or some of the definitions of which role that don't have a role that matches this, we try to see whether it's the signs on the subsites on the exit ramps or the examples we have here. We're trying to give you a lot of examples that should become familiar with what you may be seeing or encountering in your own work.
Mm-hmm. Sean, over to you as well about the role-based decision tree that Bill mentioned.
There we are. So we've got the role-based decision tree here. And this, again, as Bill had said, is inspired by the concept of Racy Matrix and built as a framework to define ownership for accessibility in a cross-functional product team with various levels of ownership. So we've got primary, secondary, and contributor. And we've got a link there to that. And I just noticed that somebody in the chat was asking for links. We will go ahead and post some of those at the end there so everybody can get those.
So as we mentioned, we've harmonized our work together as a task force. As we come together and sort of based on our own experiences with teams, or advocating for accessibility within teams, or as practitioners ourselves, sort of a harmonized master checklist where we all kind of work together. Do we agree that this task point should be assigned, the primary owner? Should that be the UX designer, or that should be the developer? So that's our combined harmonized work that we've done in the task force. So that's a great resource to demonstrate. And just another thing I wanted to share is that we've been, as Bill said in the beginning, we presented this first draft in March 2 years ago, but we've been continuing to witness and create and do workshops where we invite practitioners to come and actually walk through the ARRM exercise, and then give us their thoughts and their feedback and their own experiences of who should own what. But other sources of checkpoints, they can come from our ready-made role-based templates and master checklist, as mentioned. Or if you want to look around your own house and up in the attic, you'll see that I'm sure you've got sources or resources for these things to do or action points. So an audit report, for instance, whether it's scanning with an automated platform or manual testing results from a conformance test, those that I'm sure you'll uncover accessibility issues that you'll need to fix. So you can look at that audit report and then conduct the exercise based on those findings. Or you may have outstanding, tickets in Jira or the QA backlog of, issues with the website that, accessibility issues that have been low priority for the last couple of months. Dig those out and make those your action points. You could do the ARRM exercise on your sort of backlog of Jira tickets. Or what you could do is come right out of that, specific project lifecycle and look at an overall business requirements document for an upcoming build of a web page or a building of a product. What are the business requirements? And then start there. If people need to complete a form within a time frame, or they need to complete the form and enter this information. All right, let's conduct an exercise to make sure that form becomes accessible. Who's going to own the input fields being coded correctly with labels, that kind of thing. So the BRD is an excellent example, or the user interface, design documents or UIDs, or obviously a mock-up in Figma or anything that you might be using today. Also, your own design system and component libraries. You might want to go back onto old components, test them, and you've recognized a few issues. Run the ARRM exercise to determine the responsibility and ownership of who's going to fix those. Style guides, and then, as I said, user research uncovers obviously a lot of really interesting and informative user impact data. Usability studies and user feedback sessions are also excellent things to translate people's usability and user experience into actionable items that you can assign ownership for. So just quickly from me, how can I use the ARRM? I kind of touched upon those two use cases, either ongoing, where we've given you that ready-made template, a list of accessibility responsibilities and considerations for each role. Based on those 4 core roles, use that as your starting point. Or a lot of the times I've personally seen or used the ARRM is on a project-by-project basis. So it's an exercise when you've got a list of issues to fix, you can apply the ARRM framework to it. Or just going back to the first point again, ongoing, where at an organizational level, I've seen the ARRM used where no one is owning PDF. No one's owning PDF accessibility. No one wants to have ownership. Or there's a whole department that, who's owning video transcripts. When these questions get asked, the ARRM exercise is a really good way to assign ownership at those 3 ownership levels, document that, and then it's never in question. You have that standardized in your organization. Back to you, Bill, about getting involved. I think Bill or Sean want to talk about how to get involved.
Yeah, I said thank you. We are actively looking for more volunteers to join the team. So if you would like to get involved, we have ways for you to do that. And one of the things to do at Catha is part of it is if you want to help build this resource, we want you to reach out to the EOWG, the Education and Outreach Working Group, which has this and other projects. Maybe your interest is similar, but not in this general area. The EOWG is looking for you to give your feedback and be a participant, because we could always use more volunteers, and we'd love to have you on the team. And so we've got some links here, so you can reach out to the EOWG directly at w3.org/WAI, all capital, /about, ABOUT/groups, GROUPS/EOWG/. That'll take you to the EO working group webpage, which is shown on the slide. Otherwise, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. I'm in Bill Tyler, all one word, and we've got these links on here for Jen, Sean, and Denis. So you can reach out to us that way. And if beyond that, that's pretty much all of what we want to cover. Here's a picture. I said we were trying to reach, when we introduced the ARRM framework at CSUN, this is where we were preparing for it. So this is a photograph of me and Jen and Sean sitting on the balcony in the room, at the hotel, and enjoying the fine weather that we were having down there, compared to what I'm experiencing right now in Minnesota, where we're getting a half a foot of snow. But if you want to reach out, we've got email addresses. Mine is btyler@optum.com.
Hit the hide screen there.
Yeah, and then there's Sean Kelly, which is SEAN_KELLY. There we go, at optum.com, and Jennifer Chadwick, which is JCHA@siteimprove.com. And so I think with that, we can try to see if there are any questions in the chat and so forth.
I just realized this was on the whole time. Sorry, guys. Hopefully
that
didn't overcover any of the information on the screen.
I think that's the only thing it really covered.
No, thank you so much for presenting. We have a few questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put them up on the screen and read it off and ask you to answer them. So first question we have, is ARRM focused only on large companies, or can smaller companies or individuals benefit from these methodologies?
Okay, I can jump into that one. So I think the main thing that you're going to find with smaller versus larger companies is that in a larger company, you might have even like the front end development, like maybe the HTML and the CSS is separate from the JavaScript development. And in a smaller company, you might have people wearing more hats, like maybe your design and UX people are the same. So it really, how granular it is, what's grouped with what hats are the same, what are different, that's going to be different for different organizations, whatever size. But that's the main difference you're going to find in a smaller place versus a bigger place. And this is just as applicable for a Fortune 8 company like where Bill and I work, or like a 3-person web development group.
Yeah, the situation ultimately is the more people you have, the more you have your decisions being distributed. If you have a small group, if you're a one person shop, well, you own all the decisions.
Mhm.
It's when if you have difficulty or you have some sort of breaking apart of some of the roles, and especially if they are very discrete, then you're probably going to need this. A lot of it just depends on your situation. And as I said, the definition of the roles will vary. When I've done presentations on this, some people say, well, I don't see the role I have. We don't use that job title in things. That's where you're going to need to, that way we try to make sure we describe what the decisions are, whether they are part of like presentation or functional specs, non-functional specs, implementation, text and content. These are the sorts of ways that you're going to, and the fewer people you have, the more likely you're going to have them consolidated in one person and instead, but ultimately, they do tend to break into these separate domains where you have different expertise, and to the degree that your team needs that definition to help get clarity, that's where the value of ARRM comes in.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't matter the size, because that's a very good question that I've definitely been asked. How much does this cost? It's absolutely free. It's an open source framework, and I wear three hats. Is this helpful for me? As long as you are if you're at any time if you're collaborating with others, you talk amongst yourselves and you sort of agree who's going to be the primary decision or secondary decision maker. And I think it's most successful. It could be successful in a small team where people wear many hats, as long as you're documenting who's doing what. I think that's the outcome that could happen at any level. As long as people are come out of it feeling a clarity and an ownership and accountability about who's doing what. I think that's the hardest thing it's hard to start when you don't know who's doing what in the first place. So this framework is trying to do that, whether it's amongst us, amongst three people, or across a team of 100. That's how I feel. Anyway, yeah.
That's great. Thanks for all of you answering that question. I have another question from the audience here. I'm going to show on the screen. Could this framework be used to give structure to a hub and spoke / center of excellence model for an accessibility practice?
Funny they should say that, because that's what they call our group and where we work as the Accessibility Center of Excellence.
Absolutely.
I think for me, I'm not so familiar with the hub and spoke. I think that ultimately what our process does, regardless of what the structure is or the process you use, I mean, we tend to assume Agile since that's so popular and common, but if it was applied to a waterfall model from the way you do a process, or again, your organizational structure, the decisions are being made for different purposes and the impacts they have to accessibility are relatively unchanged. How it may be impacted by your, the model of your practice is going to be, I think it still can be applied. The specifics to a hub spoke, I don't know that I can speak to that directly, though.
I've definitely have direct experience where, as someone coming in and consulting or helping a team understand this process. Yeah, we conducted an exercise, the ARRM exercise, figured out solutions together, kind of put an ownership of primary, secondary, and those names against each of those tasks in their list, and then there's just so much. We have a lot of coffee and donuts throughout a 2-hour session, but we have a lot of clarity and understanding and ownership after it. Then that's documented, and then that document is put into the hub, and then it's sort of shared. So, Bill, I think what you're saying is that the user needs, the user impact is going to be consistent. The role responsible for content, for writing, for text versus visual content is not likely to change. That skill set, each role is going to own those things for every project. So there's a good chance that you could do the exercise and create your own, templated roles and responsibilities list for each of those roles, and then just post that in a hub as a resource for everyone to, regardless of the project, you can regularly check back on those learnings from the first time you did it, or do it as many times as you want. As once you start to do it, it can be really helpful, especially for project managers who they're also part of it. They should be seeing this collaboration and, either in a team exercise, or they should be able to look at that documentation in the hub and say, the UX designer so the developer is always going to be responsible for making sure that the link and the icon are are one, right? In the URL are one. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I think you could definitely take our ready-made template list or your own first or second or third conducted exercise and have that as evergreen, as a touch point, as a resource point for sure.
Great. We got a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to share another one. You mentioned that you have workshops. Do you have a list of upcoming workshops, or has that kind of been put on hold?
I threaten the workshops. Do other of you know? I know I've done a few locally in the Toronto area with some pretty great folks. Do you have any interest in, or do you know of anyone upcoming?
Not that I know of. In the past, we've done them at CSUN, at AccessU, at AxCon, but right now we are, we don't have anything new. We've been trying to hold the presentations and workshops we've done to share off new information. Right now, I don't know we have any explicit workshops, though that is something we might have to consider. It's just a matter of like what would be the right venue and time to do it. Since we have different resources, and Denis in particular works at DQ, and so there might be ways we could do that, but we might take that back as a suggestion. So we can, if there's an interest, if you make those suggestions to us, we can probably get something to happen. Because as I said, we're looking for participation, and maybe it starts with just simply having workshops that people can attend. Normally, again, we've been doing it through we had like last May at AccessU virtually, we had a half-hour session where we walked through much of the things we presented today, and then we broke off into work groups and did exercises, and we had other things there to support that. We were letting teams run the exercise. We gave them checkpoints. We let them walk through the decision tree and do these sorts of things. So yeah, I think we don't have them. So getting back to it, no, we don't have any at the moment, but we might be looking into doing that so people can join that and have that guidance.
So you've got our email addresses and our LinkedIn contacts. So hit us up, reach out, and then when we do get around to doing more of that, we can reach back out to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Please blast us on LinkedIn when you have something. That sounds great. All right. Next question we have here. Do you have any recommendations on how to introduce the concept of roles and responsibilities to all stakeholders?
I do. So one of my favorite ways to go with this is to say, look at what seems like even if you just look at, not even checkpoints, just look at the success criteria. There's so many of them that looks a little overwhelming. Then you slice up the pie and you see, okay, well, only this little piece is your problem. And especially developers love to hear this too, because they're often surprised at how few they have compared to, say, UX designers. So I think that's a good start out. It's like, hey, this is one way to make this easier.
Absolutely.
And to keep you focused on the spot. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say that kind of speaks to things that you can find. I've done in doing the role-based analysis over the past 7-8 years. In fact, I'd say one of the things you're asking about presentations, I'm doing one at CSUN next month, talking about doing role-based analysis to the WCAG 2.2 success criteria. And what Sean was saying is one of the things that's part of my presentation. I asked, the part about doing the introduction is trying to, I tend to think it was like you demystify accessibility by one, introducing it as a concept that you as a stakeholder, as a designer, a content author, or even a business owner, you are doing things that can impact accessibility. And that can be scary. So, well, I didn't know I did that. What do I need to learn about this? Like, well, the analysis that I've done on the success criteria, and will tend to apply to the checkpoints as well, is that one, as Sean said, developers, when I introduce role-based, they are really they're happy, because the fundamental assumption is that accessibility and developers code accessibility, and developers aren't the owner of most success criteria and the design decisions. It's all further in this process. So there's a lot of opportunity for shift left. But this gets, like the point that Sean was saying, oh my God, what do I have to learn? I say, well, you don't have to learn it all. One of the things that we look at is if you know who owns what responsibilities, which checkpoints, success criteria, you can get custom training that will work for that role. You don't have to teach everybody how to code HTML. You don't need to do color theory for everybody. You can find the things that they own and give them the information they need. Furthermore, as crazy as accessibility is and as difficult as WCAG can be to understand, the majority, say, when I've done the analysis, a lot of accessibility that you see today is really based on existing best practices and standards. Content authoring is full of it. I mean, AAA criteria about, introducing new terms and defining things and using simple language. Those are part of writing guidelines. So if you are the content author, all we need to do for you, and the same for the other roles with the decisions they make, is follow the best practices. Use what you know as a professional to do your best work. We will give you as accessibility. You're getting, if you do those things, you're meeting better accessibility all over the place. And that is where you can try to keep it from being so overwhelming. And if you get targeted instructions that leverage the information that the roles already have, and you identify what their decisions they're making, that's part of it. And another is, in the process, introduction of all those decisions are in things like your functional requirements, in your style guide, in design comps, in your content. If you identify where those are coming in, then you can have the reviews on that. And if you have an accessibility engineer, you can have it on there so that they sign it off. Great case in point, style guides. If you define your colors and you got your foreground and background, you can do your color contrast testing right there, because they should stay the same foreground and background because they need to be on brand, and you extend it so that the branding guidelines and the style guide define your color contrast. And that is a great example of shift left, but you need to get that visual designer that little piece of information. They already know a bit about color contrast. They just need that little extra piece that you need to know that these are the thresholds that you need to make as a minimum. And here's a tool that are tools that will allow you to do that calculation, because you don't necessarily know that, but it's not too overwhelming. And that will help get that responsibility distributed and try to get us from being, yes, you are making these decisions. You really want to make things accessible, but you don't have to learn everything. And you know a lot of this already.
Yeah, so that's exactly how I do it too. So introducing roles and responsibilities in a digital team, we already have that set out. We already have a process. What you're doing with accessibility and inclusive design is just enhancing your own skill set. So content authors, you don't have to learn code all of a sudden to have your part. You're just leveraging your own expertise, but stopping those barriers by stopping poor practices and embedding best practices. And then one last thing about the WCAG success criteria. If anyone's a fan, like I am, of the quick reference guide version, you can they're listed on the left, and you've got all the success criteria on the right. Just behind that is a filter. You can filter out the WCAG success criteria per role. So designer, that also helps. So Bill, to your point, if you're unsure about which WCAG success criteria relate to your own skill set as a designer or developer or content writer, you can filter out just the ones that that you might be responsible for.
Great. We got about a 3-minute warning here. I'm going to go on to the next question. Probably time for one, maybe two more, but this is a great discussion. The next question we have is, will ARRM have downloadable templates as part of this framework?
I think the situation is that we want to get that poster with the exit ramps. That's going to become a downloadable item. We just have to get it finalized. But we gave links to the templates, and all of those things are available now. And as I think we should. It's like there was a question I saw. It's like, do we have the slide deck available for download? I think it should be, but I don't think we gave that. No, if we have it, I don't think we gave out that URL. It should become available, but if we go to the resources, the links, I think they got put in the chat. You can download this. Once you get in there, it's still the EO site is a work in progress, and in fact we're going to be migrating off of into GitHub or something in the near future. But ultimately, the answer is yes. We have it available for download now. We just have to look at the chat. I think they've been they put a lot of those things for the different roles in there, and if you get from there, you can try getting that information.
Yep, they're just on HTML pages now, as Bill said, on the wiki page. So feel free to print them or download them or export them into a spreadsheet or something to get started.
That's great. And again, I think we have time for one more question. So I'm going to go for it here. Can you provide an example of an item with accessibility ownership at Exit One Business?
I saw that when it was coming in through the chat, and I like to grab that one because when I do the role-based analysis, there is one success criterion, and most of the things related to it are the business owner. And it tends to be the one related to, they tend to be around the things which have legal implications. So if you think about any checkpoints, especially around this authentication or the process for reviewing or things like that, that's where the business owner usually has to have the final say, because they've got the requirements that they need to meet for external parties. I'm trying to think this, success. Let's see, I should have brought out the information, but ultimately you get to, it's like basically the authentication sequence. Ideally, you would want the system to never have to log you out. You just sign in. I mean, imagine if Amazon saw you and would just let you in, and when you left, your system was safe. That would be the ideal. It would be extremely accessible. You could take as long as you needed, no matter whatever time it took or how distracted you were or challenges you faced trying to get it done. That would be great. But business and legal say you can't do that. So the parts about, it's like, how long do you have to session? Well, WCAG says that you can do it. If you can leave it up for 20 hours, that would be great. Well, that would be wonderful, but I bet business is going to say, no, you can't do that. They're going to be actively involved. And ultimately, there's going to be a lot of give and take, probably between the UX designer saying this would be the best from a usability, accessibility standpoint, and the business owner, no, from a legal perspective, that isn't going to work. And those tend to be where you would get something where the business owners, because ultimately they have, they're going to drive that. They're going to be actively involved. They would have given the requirements, and they're going to be asked consistently. And something like that is an area where a business owner is going to have it, because it's where the abstract parts come in, and the implications are huge. And you can't. There's no wiggle room. It's like the essential exception, and I'll say unless it's essential to the operation, and that's where business can often come in.
Sean, I'm sure you've got one. For me, just quickly, it would be non-functional requirements, be like having an accessibility statement, have an accessibility mandate, and also the legal requirement that WCAG or accessibility can never be descoped from any project. Have that in your BRDs, documentation. That's your responsibility as a business owner. Sean, over to you. Sorry. I totally took over. Sorry.
No, it's completely fine. Completely fine. That's a great observation. And just kind of connecting a couple dots from what Bill said. So in a lot of, rather than having like 20 more different roles, so business can be things that come down from the business itself. There might be something that comes down from security. It might be something that comes down from legal. So those would all be things that could be under business in that one. And just in the same way that there's another comment about user research, I believe Martha put that in, that would be something we typically see in UX. I mean, it would be a subset, but if that's a bigger apparatus where you are and they have a role in this, you'd want to bust that out to a separate role. And that's one of the places we say where your mileage might vary as far as where you put some of these, because if you've got a larger, more diversification of these roles, you might find that you need to split them up more finely.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I put up the other question here, but so we are at time. This was a great discussion. We have some questions. Feel free to answer them. Reach out. Thanks for all the contact info, and thanks for this great conversation. Jen, Bill, Sean, thank you so much. Any links, we're going to share out. Look for us on Twitter. We'll put some links out there. And remember to join us next month for another talk about all things accessibility. We already have March identified. We're going to have Edmund Dunn. We'll be presenting on a topic called From Disabled Veteran to Full Stack Drupal Developer. I'm really looking forward to that. I do Drupal, so I'm very excited about that. So just a reminder, we're always looking for new speakers and new voices in the accessibility community. So please reach out to us. We make a conscious effort to include marginalized groups in tech in our speaker lineup. Please let us know if you have ideas also on how to make AlleyTalks better and more friendly to all. Quick reminder for those with IAAP certifications, AlleyTalks speakers and attendees get professional development credits through your IAAP for continuing education. So thanks so much. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel to never miss a talk, and catch us on Twitter to continue the conversation. Thanks again. Any final thoughts from Bill, Sean, or Jen?
It was great to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
So much for having us. Yep. So
Great.
Good to hear everyone's feedback. So thank you, everyone.
And thanks for the great questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Until next time. Bye.
Have a good one.